In 1594, a Portuguese galleon, the Cinco Chagas, set sail from Lisbon, its hull heavy with treasure beyond imagination, diamonds, rubies, and pearls, along with 22 chests said to be worth over $1 billion today. But fate would not favor the Cinco Chagas. A violent storm near the Azores tore her apart, sending sailors and treasure to the bottom of the Atlantic, and giving birth to one of history's most enduring maritime legends. For centuries, men have tried to recover her riches. Some lost their lives, others their sanity, and many were haunted by whispers of a curse that clung to the ship. Today, we uncover the story of the Cinco Chagas, the shipwreck, the treasure, the obsession, and the secrets that lie beneath the waves. This is the legend of the Cinco Chagas Part 1. Departure and Fate. The harbor of Goa was alive with anticipation on a humid morning in March 1594. The air was thick with the scent of salt, spice, and tar, and the cries of dock workers echoed across the piers as merchants, sailors, and soldiers hurried about their duties. Amid this orchestrated chaos, a ship unlike any other in the Portuguese fleet awaited her voyage, the Cinco Chagas. She was a galleon of immense proportions, her hull carved from the finest teak, reinforced with iron, and polished until the sun glinted off her deck like a shard of polished obsidian. Her 3 masts stretched skywards, adorned with billowing white sails, marked with the royal coat of arms of Portugal. She was said to be the most valuable vessel ever launched in Portuguese India, not only for her size and armament, but for the treasure she carried. Captain Francisco de Mello walked the deck with the careful precision of a man accustomed to command. He was a tall man, weathered by years at sea, with a hawk-like gaze that missed nothing. His hands, calloused and scarred from rope and cannon, rested briefly on the polished rail as he surveyed the bustle of sailors loading crates of silk, pepper, and gold coins from the east. Yet the true value aboard the Cinco Chagas lay in the hold beneath her decks. 22 chests of precious stones, diamonds, rubies, and pearls enough to make the wealthiest monarchs of Europe pale in envy. The treasure had been acquired over years of trade across India and the East Indies, secured with diplomacy, cunning, and occasionally force. Each chest was carefully sealed, its contents catalogued and guarded. Rumors had begun to spread among the sailors that the cargo was cursed, that the riches demanded a price from those who dared to claim them. Captain Mello paid no mind to superstition. Experience had taught him that the sea itself was far more dangerous than any legend. The Cinco Chagas was not alone in her voyage. She sailed as part of a Portuguese treasure fleet, a convoy of galleons bound for Lisbon, laden with spices, silks, and jewels that represented the lifeblood of the empire. Yet it was she, the Cinco Chagas, that drew the most attention. She was a floating palace, armed with cannons capable of sinking rival ships, yet designed with elegance and strength to carry a fortune across oceans that were as treacherous as they were vast. The crew numbered over 300 souls, a mix of seasoned sailors, soldiers, merchants, and servants. Each man had a role, a rhythm to his movements, and a place within the delicate ecosystem of the ship. Some whispered of the treasure's curse, while others spoke with awe of the ship's grandeur. Children of the city sometimes came to the docks just to watch her sails rise like wings against the horizon, dreaming of adventure and wealth. As the fleet prepared to set sail, the wind began to shift, teasing the white sails with a hint of the journey ahead. The Cinco Chagas groaned as ropes were tightened and anchors lifted. Sailors called out orders in Portuguese, Malay, and the rough jargon of men who had spent their lives at sea. The city of Goa receded, a mosaic of red-tiled roofs and bustling markets. As the fleet steered toward the open waters of the Arabian Sea, Captain Mello convened a final meeting with his officers below deck. Maps of the Indian Ocean, the Cape of Good Hope, and the Atlantic lay spread across a heavy oak table. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice steady, "this voyage is more than a journey. It is a test of courage, skill, and patience. The seas we cross are merciless, and the winds do not answer to kings or merchants. We carry wealth that could rival the coffers of Lisbon itself, but it is nothing compared to the lives of the men under my command. Keep your wits. Follow orders. Trust in the ship." His words were met with nods of respect, some murmured agreement, and in a few eyes, the unmistakable gleam of ambition. Each officer knew that treasure could turn men's hearts as sharply as a knife, and that the ship's fate could alter the course of empires. Days turned into weeks as the fleet sailed westward, the monsoon winds propelling them toward Africa and beyond. The Cinco Chagas cut through the waves with effortless grace, her cannons ready, her decks alive with the rhythm of men at work. Storms came and went, each testing the skill of the captain and crew. Yet it was not the storms that would define the ship's legacy. It was the fateful Atlantic beyond the Azores, a stretch of ocean notorious for sudden tempests and treacherous currents. At night, the treasure below deck became a source of fascination and fear. Some sailors claimed to hear the faint clinking of gems, even when the chests were sealed. Others swore that shadows moved unnaturally across the hold, as if the wealth itself demanded guardianship. Superstitions were whispered in corners. A man who touches the treasure greedily will vanish at sea, or a crew member who counts the chests will meet a violent end. Captain Mello dismissed these tales as idle chatter, though even he could not deny the aura that seemed to cling to the ship like mist. By the time the fleet approached the Azores, the Atlantic revealed its darker side. Fog rolled across the water, concealing jagged rocks and hidden shoals. The wind shifted without warning, and the sea became a restless predator, heaving and crashing against the galleons. Captain Mello kept a vigilant watch, understanding that even a single mistake could spell disaster. The Cinco Chagas, for all her size and strength, was not immune to the whims of the ocean. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in streaks of crimson and gold, a lookout cried from the masthead, "Land, land to starboard." The fleet adjusted its course cautiously. The Azores rose like emerald sentinels from the mist, their cliffs jagged and unforgiving. Captain Mello's heart tightened. He knew the waters around the islands were treacherous, filled with hidden reefs and sudden shallows. Yet the course had to be maintained. Delay could mean missing favorable winds, or worse, encountering rival ships eager to claim Portuguese riches. Below deck, the treasure remained untouched, a silent promise of unimaginable wealth. Above, the crew labored tirelessly, adjusting sails, checking rigging, and scanning the horizon for signs of danger. The Cinco Chagas seemed almost alive, creaking and groaning as though she knew the peril that awaited her. It was in these moments, between calm and storm, hope and dread, that the story of the Cinco Chagas truly began. For the seas do not respect ambition, and treasure, no matter how grand, often comes with a price paid in courage, cunning, and sometimes lives. Captain Mello retired to his cabin that night, studying charts and stars, calculating the safest passage through the Azores. He lit a single candle, its flame trembling as the ship rocked gently. His thoughts wandered to home, to Portugal, to the glory and danger that awaited. He had faced storms before, enemies on the high seas, even mutinous crews. Yet a deep unease lingered. A whisper of foreboding carried on the wind, warning him that the Cinco Chagas voyage would not end as any man expected. Outside, the Atlantic whispered against the hull, a lullaby with a hidden menace. Somewhere in the depths, the treasure slept, silent but potent. The galleon, majestic and formidable, sailed onward, unaware that her name would become legend, not for the journey completed, but for the fate that would consume her, and the riches that would remain forever lost beneath the waves. Part 2. The Storm and Shipwreck. The dawn broke over the Azores with a deceptive serenity. Mist clung to the jagged cliffs like cobwebs, and the Atlantic shimmered under the rising sun, calm and inviting. From above, the island seemed benign, almost picturesque, but those who knew the waters recognized the danger hidden beneath the surface. Rocks lurked just below the waves, and sudden currents could turn even the sturdiest galleon into a toy of the sea. Captain Francisco de Mello paced the deck of the Cinco Chagas, the weight of command pressing on his shoulders. The wind was shifting, carrying with it a faint chill and the scent of approaching storm. He consulted the charts again, eyes narrowing at the treacherous channels marked with cautionary notes from previous mariners. The Azores were notorious, and even the most skilled sailors often underestimated the peril. The crew, seasoned though many were, felt unease ripple through them. Sailors whispered of curses, of the treasure below deck, and of the omens that had haunted the Cinco Chagas since Goa. One man claimed to have seen a shadow move among the chests. Another swore the gems themselves were glowing faintly beneath the lantern light. Mello dismissed the murmurs with a firm voice. "Focus on the wind, the sea, and your duty," he ordered. Superstition will not keep you alive. Yet even he could not deny the subtle shift in the air. The sea darkened in the distance, a rolling expanse of gray with whitecaps hinting at the violence to come. Clouds gathered like a swelling army, blackening the horizon, and the wind began to howl with a low, menacing timbre. By mid-morning, the storm had arrived. The Cinco Chagas pitched and rolled, her hull groaning under the stress. Waves towered over the deck, crashing with relentless force and sweeping sailors overboard if they were careless. Orders rang out, shouted above the roar of the sea. Secure the rigging, reef the sails, hold fast. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the terrified faces of men and the glint of gold and gems below deck. Thunder followed, a rolling drum that shook the very timbers of the galleon. The crew fought valiantly, but the storm seemed to have a mind of its own, lashing the ship with fury. Below deck, the treasure trembled in its chests, as though the very wealth sensed the coming disaster. A few sailors dared to glance at the jewels, and in that brief moment, the allure of unimaginable riches made their stomachs tighten with both awe and dread. None dared speak of it aloud. The storm's roar was enough to drown any words of warning. As the galleon approached the Azorean coast, the danger escalated. Rocks emerged suddenly from the gray waters, unseen until the ship was perilously close. Captain Mello shouted for evasive maneuvers, but the wind and waves were merciless. The Cinco Chagas strained under the assault, her timbers creaking, her hull shuddering with every monstrous wave. The crew worked as one, but the sea was a cruel adversary. One violent swell lifted the galleon and cast her down into a trough, splintering the bowsprit and sending sailors tumbling into the icy water. Shouts of alarm and despair filled the air. Mello barked orders, but the storm had overtaken even the most precise command. At that moment, the first of the Azorean reefs struck. A deafening crack reverberated through the galleon as the hull splintered. Water poured in with unstoppable force, rushing into the lower decks where the treasure slept. Men screamed, some clinging to ropes, others to the broken timbers. The Cinco Chagas lurched violently, rolling onto her side as the storm drove her mercilessly towards the jagged coastline. Amid the chaos, stories of heroism and cowardice unfolded. Sailors risked their lives to save comrades, dragging them from the waves. Others froze, paralyzed by fear, and were swept away into the churning depths. The galleon's cannons, once symbols of power, clattered uselessly against the deck, submerged by the rising water. Captain Mello remained at the helm as long as he could, gripping the wheel with white-knuckled determination. His eyes, trained for decades at sea, scanned the waves for any chance of salvation. But the Atlantic was implacable, indifferent to skill, courage, or the value of the cargo. The Cinco Chagas struck again and again, each impact tearing her further apart. The masts splintered under the strain, sails shredded by the wind, rigging snapping like brittle rope. The hold filled rapidly with water, the treasure chests threatening to break free and smash into the decks above. Some chests were hurled upwards by the force, scattering jewels across the waterlogged hold. For those few moments, it seemed as if the treasure itself fought to escape the doom that claimed the galleon. Night fell in a whirlwind of rain, darkness, and the relentless pounding of the sea. Survivors clung to what they could, huddled against the cold, sodden decks. The Cinco Chagas, majestic and formidable moments before, was now a battered shell, a monument to the unforgiving power of the Atlantic. By the early hours of the next day, the ship was unrecognizable. Timbers were torn, decks flooded, and the wind howled like a chorus of ghosts. Captain Mello, exhausted, drenched, and barely clinging to life, knew that salvation was impossible. With a final glance at the storm-tossed horizon, he gave the order to abandon ship. Few survived the night. Some were washed ashore on the Azorian coast, their bodies broken, their spirits haunted by what they had seen. Others vanished without a trace, claimed by the dark Atlantic, their screams swallowed by the storm. And the treasure 22 chests of diamonds, rubies, and pearls lay submerged in the depths, a secret whispered only to the sea and the men who had died trying to reach it. In the aftermath, locals spoke in hushed tones of the wreck. The storm had passed, leaving only debris and bodies scattered along the rugged coastline. But stories persisted of strange lights beneath the water, of glittering shapes glimpsed in the depths, and of a galleon that would not rest. Some said the treasure had been cursed. Others claimed it was guarded by the souls of the lost crew. The Cinco Chagas had met her fate, yet the legend was only beginning. Centuries would pass, and men would come from far and wide, drawn by tales of unimaginable wealth, daring to search the same waters that had claimed the galleon. The sea had taken her once, and it would demand the same price from any who dared to disturb her resting place. And so, the story of the Cinco Chagas became immortal, not in life, but in death. Not in the journey completed, but in the treasure lost, lying silent and waiting beneath the waves. Part 3. Rumors and Legends. The Azores are a cluster of islands cloaked in mist and mystery, their rugged cliffs rising from the Atlantic like ancient sentinels. For the people who lived there in the late 16th century, the sea was both a provider and a predator. Fishing was a way of life, and tales of ships lost to storms were common enough. Yet nothing prepared them for the story of the Cinco Chagas. When the battered remains of the galleon were first spotted along the rocky coast, it was a shock that reverberated across the islands. Fragments of timber, splintered masts, and wreckage littered the beaches, mingling with the lifeless bodies of sailors who had not survived the storm. Among the locals, whispers spread quickly, carrying with them fear, fascination, and greed. They say it carried chests filled with gold, diamonds, and pearls. A fisherman muttered to his companion as they hauled nets from the surf. 22 chests, they say. Enough to make a king richer than any man in Lisbon. The story was enough to spark the imagination of even the most cautious islander. By the following week, a small crowd had gathered at the wreck site, scavenging what they could from the shallow waters and the beach. Rusted cannon, splintered barrels, and broken crates were prized finds. Among them, however, none could reach the deeper parts of the hold, submerged and inaccessible. It did not take long for rumors to gain a life of their own. Some swore that the wreck itself was guarded by a curse. Men who had survived the storm were said to hear voices calling from the deep, the laughter of lost sailors, or the jingling of treasure in the hold. A local healer insisted that the galleon's riches were cursed, that they demanded a price in blood for any who dared to claim them. In the years that followed, stories of the Cinco Chagas spread across the Azores and beyond. Sailors returning to Portugal carried tales of a ship that had vanished beneath the waves, leaving a treasure beyond imagination. Some claimed they had seen glimmers of light beneath the water at night, as if the jewels themselves refused to rest quietly in the hold. Others told of phantom cries and the shapes of men walking the deck in the mist, eternally bound to the ship that had drowned them. By the early 1600s, the legend had grown. The Cinco Chagas became a tale told around firesides and in taverns, a story whispered to children to warn them of the ocean's dangers. Maps circulated among treasure hunters, marking possible locations of the wreck, though no one could be certain. The ocean had swallowed the galleon, and with it, the promise of unimaginable wealth. Yet the allure of the treasure was irresistible. Even those who did not believe in curses were drawn by the thought of diamonds and rubies worth more than entire towns. Some made daring attempts to dive for the wreck, relying on crude grappling hooks and long ropes. Many returned empty-handed, claiming that the sea itself would not relinquish her prize. Others never returned at all, swallowed by currents or dashed against the rocks. Stories of early treasure hunters began to intertwine with myth. A fisherman who claimed to have found a chest of pearls refused to speak further, for fear the curse would follow him home. Another sailor, obsessed with the jewels, spent years trying to locate the wreck, and when he finally returned, he was a hollowed man, muttering of voices and shadows beneath the waves. Even as centuries passed, the legend of the Cinco Chagas endured. By the 18th century, accounts of the ship and her treasure had reached far beyond Portugal. Letters and diaries spoke of riches lying at the bottom of the Atlantic, guarded by nature, superstition, and perhaps the restless spirits of those who had died in the storm. Some doubted the treasure existed at all. Others swore that it remained, waiting for the day someone brave or foolish enough would claim it. The Azores themselves became a magnet for adventurers. Locals would guide curious travelers to dangerous coves and submerged reefs, often warning them with a smile and a shake of the head. "The sea does not give freely," they said, "and she does not forgive those who are greedy." Many laughed at the warnings, eager to test their luck. Few returned with proof, and even fewer with treasure. The Cinco Chagas had become more than a shipwreck. She was a symbol of obsession, ambition, and the limits of human courage. Men who sought her wealth risked not only their lives, but their sanity. Tales of glowing jewels beneath the waves, phantom cries from the hold, and ships mysteriously disappearing while searching for the wreck became commonplace. By the late 1600s, several documented expeditions attempted to locate the ship. Portuguese nobles financed divers and small fleets, drawn by promises of unimaginable fortune. Some found fragments of the ship, iron fittings, or coral-encrusted timber. But the 22 chests of diamonds, rubies, and pearls remained stubbornly elusive. The treasure became a legend, its value whispered in tones of awesome. Estimated it could be worth over $1 billion in today's terms. Even then, rumors of the curse persisted. Men who grew too greedy, or who disrespected the memory of the drowned sailors, were said to suffer misfortune, illness, accidents, or sudden death. Locals told stories of strangers who came to the islands to hunt the treasure, only to vanish without a trace. Those who returned were often changed, haunted by nightmares and whispers from the deep. The legend of the Cinco Chagas was cemented not only by her treasure, but by the unseen forces that seemed to guard it. By the time the 18th century dawned, the wreck was no longer merely a historical event. It had become a story of mystery, fear, and fascination. Men spoke of her in whispers. Adventurers plotted in secret, and the Atlantic held her secrets in its cold, unyielding depths. And so, the Cinco Chagas drifted into the realm of legend, a tale that would endure for centuries. Her treasure lay hidden, waiting, while her name became synonymous with daring, disaster, and the haunting allure of riches that man might never possess. Part 4. Early treasure hunts. By the turn of the 17th century, the tale of the Cinco Chagas had spread far beyond the mist-shrouded cliffs of the Azores. To the people of the islands, she was a cautionary tale of hubris and the ocean's unforgiving power. To men of ambition in Lisbon, Seville, and beyond, she became a beacon of unimaginable wealth, calling to those with courage or folly enough to brave the Atlantic in search of fortune. The first recorded attempts to recover her treasure were cautious, improvised, and often deadly. Using crude grappling hooks, small rowboats, and the knowledge passed down by local fishermen, early adventurers ventured into the reefs and shallows that had claimed the galleon. The sea was no friend to these hunters. Currents shifted without warning, and the Atlantic had a habit of claiming those who dared disturb its secrets. One such expedition was led by Captain Luis de Souza, a Portuguese nobleman who had lost his fortune in the spice trade. Drawn by stories of 22 chests brimming with diamonds, rubies, and pearls, he sailed from Lisbon in 1603 with a small crew of divers and laborers. For weeks they scoured the waters near Snow Miguel, diving repeatedly from small boats, attempting to grapple at shapes that might have been the wreck. Souza's men returned battered, sunburnt, and empty-handed. Yet some claimed to have glimpsed glimpses of gold glinting beneath the waves. Obsession took root. Men began returning to the wreck multiple times, often alone, guided by greed and the lure of riches. None ever returned from these solo dives. Some were said to have been dragged beneath by unseen currents. Others dashed upon the jagged rocks. By mid-century, the hunt for the Cinco Chagas became a dangerous mix of maritime skill, courage, and superstition. Local legends warned of a curse, that any who attempted to take the treasure without respect for the lost crew would meet a violent end. For some, this only heightened the allure. Treasure hunters from Portugal, Spain, and even the Netherlands arrived, each convinced they could outwit fate. In 1651, a Dutch privateer named Jan van der Meer arrived in the Azores, having heard of the galleon's riches from sailors in Lisbon. Unlike previous hunters, he approached with military precision. Van der Meer brought a small fleet of 3 vessels and a trained crew of divers equipped with weighted ropes and primitive diving bells. They spent days probing the waters near the wreck, hauling debris and timber, but the sea remained unyielding. Van der Meer kept meticulous journals, noting the strange currents, the sudden storms, and what he called the whispering of the depths. His men became increasingly unsettled, claiming to hear voices beneath the water or see lights glimmering far below, moving as though alive. In frustration and fear, Van der Meer abandoned the attempt, leaving behind fragments of timber and scattered coins as evidence that the treasure remained hidden. Similar expeditions followed over the decades. Some ended in minor success. Chests of corroded coins, rusted weapons, or barrels of pearls washed ashore. But the 22 legendary chests of diamonds, rubies, and pearls remained stubbornly out of reach. What made the Cinco Chagas particularly dangerous was not only the Atlantic's natural perils, but also the cunning of the currents and reefs around the Azores. Even the most experienced sailors found themselves hopelessly lost or dashed upon hidden rocks. Some men swore they saw the outlines of the galleon below the waves, but any attempt to reach her ended in disaster. Over time, obsession took hold of those who hunted her treasure. Families were abandoned, fortunes were squandered, and some men descended into madness. The galleon's legend became synonymous with ruin. The deeper a man sought her wealth, the more he risked his life and soul. In 1694, a Portuguese diver named Medius Ribeiro made what would be remembered as one of the most audacious attempts to reach the wreck. Using a crude bell and weighted ropes, he descended repeatedly into the Atlantic, bringing back fragments of timber and occasional coins. Each descent lasted hours, with Ribeiro claiming to glimpse glimmers of jewels hidden in the dark. But after a particularly long dive, he surfaced with a face drained of color, shaking, muttering of shadows and voices beneath the water. Ribeiro never returned for a second attempt. Locals whispered that the sea had claimed him, as it had so many before, and that the treasure would only reward the truly fearless or the truly foolish. By the 18th century, the Cinco Chagas had achieved near mythical status. Books and letters chronicled the attempts to recover her treasure, often exaggerating the perils and the scale of the lost wealth. Some claimed the diamonds alone were worth more than a kingdom. Others told of curses so potent that any man daring to disturb the ship would be doomed. Despite these warnings, adventurers continued to come. They were motivated by greed, ambition, and the hope that the legends were true. Maps were drawn and redrawn, each expedition claiming to have new information. Yet none could locate the galleon with certainty. Some came back richer in tailies than in treasure. Others returned never at all. Among the local population, the wreck was more than a source of fascination. It became a fixture of collective memory. Parents warned children not to venture too far into the surf. Fishermen left offerings on the cliffs, hoping to appease whatever spirit guarded the sunken galleon. And in taverns and markets, the story of the Cinco Chagas, the galleon that sank with a fortune beyond imagination, was told and retold, a warning and an invitation rolled into one. Thus the legend grew. The Cinco Chagas was no longer merely a shipwreck. She was a test of courage, cunning, and fate. Each chest of treasure became a symbol of desire and danger, and each failed expedition a testament to the sea's merciless power. To this day, the stories of early treasure hunters continue to inspire awe, fear, and ambition in those who dream of finding what lies beneath the waves of the Azores. Part 5. Modern discovery attempts. The legend of the Cinco Chagas had become a fixture in maritime lore, whispered in Lisbon taverns, recounted in libraries, and chronicled in newspapers and journals across Europe. For centuries, men had attempted to plunder her treasure, only to be thwarted by the cruel Atlantic, dangerous reefs, and the infamous curse that seemed to cling to her sunken hull. Yet with the advent of modern technology, a new era of treasure hunters emerged, engineers, inventors, and adventurers who believed that human ingenuity could finally triumph over superstition and the sea. The Cinco Chagas, as she was sometimes anglicized, had become the ultimate prize. 22 chests of diamonds, rubies, and pearls, potentially worth over $1 billion today, lying in the cold embrace of the Atlantic near the Azores. In the 1920s, a Portuguese diver named Ricardo Silveira was among the first to combine traditional diving techniques with new inventions. He used rudimentary air pumps and heavy suits to descend deeper than anyone before him. Silveira kept meticulous logs, noting strong currents, jagged reefs, and glimpses of what he believed were fragments of the Cinco Chagas hull encrusted with barnacles and coral. Silveira's dives brought him tantalizingly close to the treasure. He reported glimpsing metal glinting beneath layers of sediment and coral, as if the chests themselves were resisting discovery. Yet the currents were relentless, and the deeper he went, the more the sea seemed determined to expel him. He returned to the surface exhausted, his mind filled with visions of treasure just out of reach. Despite repeated attempts, Silveira was never able to recover even a single chest, though fragments of timber and rusted cannon confirmed he had found part of the galleon. By the mid-20th century, the legend had spread further, attracting adventurers from the United States, Britain, and the Netherlands. The age of scuba diving and sonar technology promised breakthroughs that previous generations could only dream of. Expeditions were carefully planned, with teams of engineers, divers, and even historians working together to decipher old maps, maritime records, and survivors' accounts. One of the most ambitious of these ventures occurred in 1954. A wealthy Portuguese industrialist, Domingos Carvalho, financed a private fleet to search the waters near the Azores. His team used early sonar equipment, underwater cameras, and specialized diving suits to probe the Atlantic depths. Days turned into weeks, and the expedition endured storms, equipment failures, and near-drowning incidents. Each time they thought they were close, the sonar readings would vanish, or the currents would sweep them far from the wreck site. Stories began to circulate among the crews. Divers claimed to hear strange noises beneath the waves' metal clinking, low moans, even what sounded like human voices calling out from the depths. Some reported seeing shimmering lights or flashes of red and white, like the reflection of gemstones from far below. Superstition, long dismissed by science, crept back into the minds of men who had faced the ocean's full fury. Despite the dangers, The allure of the Cinco Chagas treasure proved irresistible. Teams returned year after year, employing ever more sophisticated equipment, reinforced submersibles, deep-sea grappling devices, and even early remotely operated vehicles. Each expedition brought tantalizing hints of success: fragments of timber, cannonballs, and occasionally small pearls, but the 22 legendary chests remained elusive. Among these modern adventurers, obsession became a common thread. Some men abandoned careers, families, and social lives in pursuit of the galleon. Others descended into madness, their dreams haunted by visions of glittering jewels beneath layers of mud and coral. Journal entries from the 1960s describe divers refusing to return to the surface, drawn by an almost hypnotic glimmer of light from below. A few were lost forever, claimed by the same Atlantic that had destroyed the Cinco Chagas centuries before. By the 1980s, rumors of partially recovered treasure surfaced. Small finds of pearls, corroded coins, and gem fragments occasionally made their way to collectors, though verification was difficult. Yet each discovery only intensified the legend. Treasure hunters, historians, and journalists began to refer to the Cinco Chagas not merely as a shipwreck, but as the impossible galleon, a vessel whose wealth was matched only by the peril that protected it. One American adventurer, Thomas Avery, traveled to the Azores in 1987, inspired by the story and determined to be the first to recover a chest. He brought cutting-edge diving equipment and sonar technology, spending months mapping the seabed near the suspected wreck site. Avery wrote of a strange feeling as he descended. "I sensed that the water itself resisted him, that he was being watched by unseen eyes." On one dive, he claimed to see a line of glittering objects, partially buried in the sand. But before he could reach them, a sudden current swept him violently against a jagged reef. He emerged shaken, bruised, and convinced that the treasure remained beyond reach. Despite these repeated failures, the modern hunts of the 20th century marked a turning point. No longer limited by primitive grappling hooks or small rowboats, men could now explore the depths with unprecedented safety and precision. Yet the mystery of the Cinco Chagas endured. For every piece of evidence suggesting the galleon's remains, there were countless warnings of danger, whispers of curses, and the ever-present threat of the Atlantic itself. By the century's end, the Cinco Chagas had become the ultimate test of ambition. The 22 chests of diamonds, rubies, and pearls had survived centuries beneath the waves, protected by the sea, superstition, and the shadow of countless failed attempts. And though technology had advanced, the legend endured. The galleon was a prize for the brave, the bold, and the obsessed, and the sea would accept no failure lightly. The stage was set for a new generation of explorers. Maps, sonar readings, and historical records provided tantalizing clues. The legend of the Cinco Chagas had evolved from superstition to scientific endeavor, yet the same thrill, fear, and obsession lingered. The galleon's treasure waited, silent and imperious, beneath the cold Atlantic waves near the Azores, as if daring any man to try his luck, to tempt fate, and to test whether the ocean's wrath could finally be overcome. Part 6. Rivalries and Conflicts. The search for the Cinco Chagas had become as much about human ambition as it was about treasure. Maps, sonar readings, and historical records had narrowed the search area near the Azores, and modern technology offered unprecedented access to the wreck's location. Yet with these advances came new dangers, not from the sea alone, but from men themselves. Small companies of treasure hunters emerged, each claiming unique expertise: marine archaeologists, engineers, deep-sea divers, and even ex-military specialists. Alliances were fragile and temporary, formed more out of necessity than trust. The slightest whisper of betrayal, a misplaced map, or a leaked sonar reading could trigger sabotage or violence. In 2004, two rival expeditions set out almost simultaneously, each convinced they had pinpointed the wreck. The first, led by Portuguese explorer Miguel Soares, was well-funded and meticulously organized. The second, a shadowy consortium of international investors, headed by American entrepreneur Richard Colton, had access to cutting-edge submersibles and deep-sea scanning equipment. Both teams were aware of each other's presence and began a silent war of intelligence, deception, and intimidation. It began with minor acts of sabotage. Colton as team reported that their sonar equipment had been mysteriously damaged overnight while docked in Ponta Delgada. Azores team, in turn, discovered that their meticulously charted dive routes had been tampered with, compasses reversed, and critical navigation logs missing. Rumors spread of hired divers sabotaging rival teams, threats whispered in hotel lobbies, and mysterious vehicles trailing convoys along coastal roads. Within days, the tension escalated to violence. 2 divers from Colton's team were injured when their submersible collided with a reef under suspicious circumstances. Investigations were inconclusive. Both parties blamed the other, each insisting the accident was deliberate. The treasure, once a distant goal beneath the waves, had become a magnet for paranoia, obsession, and danger. As rivalries intensified, the psychological toll became apparent. Azores himself began losing sleep, haunted by visions of the Cinco Chagas rising from the depths, her chests glittering, her crew staring accusingly from the shadows. Members of his team argued over strategy, equipment, and ethics, often shouting into the night over minor mistakes. Divers reported hearing strange sounds beneath the waves' metal scraping, distant voices, even laughter. Some refused to dive at all, citing fear of the ship's curse, while others became reckless, driven by a mix of ambition and terror. Colton's team was not immune. Disputes over funding, diving schedules, and media attention created fractures. A diver reported finding a chest fragment during a preliminary survey, only to be dismissed by colleagues who feared it would attract Azores' attention. Nights were spent in restless planning, each member obsessed with being the first to claim the ultimate prize. In private, historians and archaeologists warned that the treasure hunt risked turning deadly. "This is no longer exploration," one commented. "It is war disguised as adventure." Yet greed and ambition proved more powerful than caution. Maps were hidden, alliances betrayed, and every sonar blip or flash of light in the depths became a cause for speculation and rivalry. The environment itself seemed to conspire with the legends. The waters near the Azores were unpredictable, shifting with currents strong enough to sweep away even the sturdiest submersible. Storms could appear without warning, and visibility underwater often dropped to near zero. Each dive became a gamble, each successful observation of the wreck a potential spark for conflict. By 2007, the competition had reached a fever pitch. Colton's team claimed to have located a formation of timbers consistent with the Cinco Chagas, prompting Azores to mobilize a rapid response expedition. Ships and submersibles from both sides raced to the coordinates, each attempting to outpace the other. Tension crackled across radios, and minor collisions occurred between vessels, barely avoided through last-minute maneuvers. Greed, paranoia, and obsession created a volatile mix. Members of both teams became increasingly isolated, suspicious, and erratic. Some spent hours in solitary observation, convinced that shadows beneath the waves were signaling secrets of the treasure. Others risked dives in worsening conditions, fearing that delay would mean losing their chance at riches that had remained elusive for centuries. By the end of the season, neither team had recovered a chest, but the conflict had left scars. Equipment was damaged, relationships fractured, and reputations tarnished. Yet the legend of the Cinco Chagas endured, more potent than ever. It had become clear that the treasure would not be claimed through technology or skill alone. The human element, the rivalries, obsessions, and betrayals, was as dangerous as the Atlantic itself. Local fishermen, long familiar with the wreck's lore, watched these events with a mix of bemusement and dread. "The sea has patience," they said. "The galleon waits, and the men who are greedy will only feed her wrath. And, indeed, many of the adventurers would leave the islands defeated, some haunted by the depths, some vowing to return, others never heard from again. The story of human conflict around the Cinco Chagas added another layer to her legend. She was no longer merely a wreck in the sea. She was a mirror of human ambition and folly. The deeper men reached for her treasure, the more the hunt consumed them, shaping not only history, but lives, sanity, and even death itself. And so, the stage was set for the next chapter. The treasure lay beneath the Atlantic waves, waiting for the bold, the foolish, or the desperate. Those who sought it would not only contend with the ocean and its hidden reefs, but with each other and with the ancient, whispered curse of the Cinco Chagas that seemed to linger still, unseen, beneath the water. Part 7. The map found was in the dusty archives of a forgotten Lisbon monastery, that the first clue in a century seemed to whisper its presence. Among brittle manuscripts and faded maritime logs, historian Helena Carvalho discovered a set of documents that would change the hunt for the Cinco Chagas forever. The documents were written in a precise, looping hand, dating back to 1593, mere months before the galleon's ill-fated voyage. They included notes from an officer aboard the ship, a man whose identity had been lost to history detailing specific navigational points currents around the Azores and cryptic mentions of safe coves and treasure, rests where the sea claims the cliffs. Marginal annotations suggested a carefully hidden route to avoid reefs that had doomed so many before. Helena, a meticulous scholar who had spent years studying Portuguese maritime history, knew immediately the significance. This was more than a map. It was a guide to the wreck itself, a document lost to time and legend. The potential was staggering. Decades of failed searches could be overturned by the careful application of centuries-old knowledge. She contacted Joaquim Mendes, a wealthy entrepreneur with a fascination for treasure hunting and the resources to mount an expedition. Joaquim had financed prior expeditions to the Azores, some of which had ended in frustration or disaster, but the lure of a century-old map was irresistible. Together, they began to plan a modern search, combining Helena's historical expertise with Joaquim's funding and the most advanced diving technology available. By early summer, the expedition was ready. Ships equipped with submersibles, sonar, and underwater cameras sailed from Lisbon toward the Azores. The team included seasoned divers, historians, engineers, and local fishermen whose ancestors had watched the galleon sink. Each member understood the stakes. This could be the expedition that ended the centuries-long mystery, or it could be another failure, adding to the galleon's curse. As they approached the islands, Helena pored over the map, tracing coordinates and making careful notes. There was an elegance to the officer's handwriting, a confidence that suggested he had known the waters intimately. Marginal symbols, at first indecipherable, began to reveal themselves as markers of reefs, safe channels, and potential locations where the treasure chests might have been cast into deeper holds during the storm. The expedition set up base on Snow Miguel, the largest of the Azores Islands, and began small reconnaissance dives. Early scans with sonar revealed unusual formations beneath the water, shapes that seemed unnatural, suggesting timber, cannon, or large objects encrusted by centuries of sediment. Excitement rippled through the team. For the first time, they felt that the galleon might finally be within reach. But the map was not straightforward. It used a combination of latitude, longitude, and cryptic notes, some referencing the stars, some alluding to tidal patterns. "The chest lies where the moon treads low," one annotation read. Helena interpreted this as a clue about tidal conditions necessary for accessing certain areas, a detail long overlooked by prior expeditions. Tensions soon rose within the team. The potential wealth beneath the waves sparked ambition, envy, and secrecy. Joaquim insisted on tight security, limiting access to the map to prevent leaks, but suspicion grew nonetheless. Divers whispered about hiding observations, Engineers argued over the precise locations, and historians debated interpretations of the notes. The curse, some muttered half-jokingly, seemed to manifest in the crew itself. By mid-July, the team conducted their first serious dive, guided by the map. The waters were calm, but the currents still proved treacherous. Submersibles descended into the dark Atlantic depths, lights cutting through the murky waters. There, partially obscured by coral and centuries of sediment, they glimpsed what appeared to be timber-sturdy beams, splintered but unmistakably man-made. Hearts pounded. Could this be the Cinco Chagas? The team proceeded with caution, carefully documenting every fragment of the wreck. In the dim light, flashes of metal cannon, fittings, and chains sparkled briefly. Yet even in these promising moments, the danger was palpable. The currents tugged at the submersibles, sediment stirred easily, and visibility dropped to almost nothing in seconds. Back on the surface, arguments erupted over strategy. Some wanted immediate recovery of chests. Others insisted on mapping every fragment before touching anything, fearing that rash action could destroy evidence or the treasure itself. Meanwhile, Helena noted the importance of the document in guiding the dives. "This map is the key," she insisted. "It's what centuries of failed expeditions lacked." Despite the progress, caution prevailed. The team decided to rest and plan before attempting any recovery of the chests, aware that even the smallest mistake could result in tragedy. The centuries-old warning seemed to echo in the minds of every diver. The Cinco Chagas does not yield her treasures lightly, yet there was no denying the optimism. For the first time in over 400 years, there was reason to believe that the treasure might finally be within reach. The discovery of the map had shifted the hunt from legend to tangible possibility. But as the sun set over the Azorean cliffs, painting the Atlantic in shades of fire and gold, Helena could not shake a feeling of foreboding. The galleon's curse, long dismissed as superstition, seemed almost alive. Shadows in the water, strange noises from below, and the obsessive glint in the eyes of her fellow explorers reminded her that the danger was as much human as it was maritime. The Cinco Chagas had been found, but finding her was only the beginning. The treasure remained, guarded by centuries of sediment, currents, and perhaps the restless spirits of those who had perished in the storm. The expedition faced a delicate balance between caution and ambition, between survival and greed. For the first time, the centuries of legend and human obsession converged. The galleon waited, silent beneath the Atlantic waves, her treasure still hidden, her curse still potent, and the map finally recovered, the only key to unlocking one of history's greatest maritime mysteries. Part 8. Descent to the wreck. The Atlantic was deceptively calm that morning, a glassy expanse of silver beneath the rising sun. Yet beneath the surface, the waters around the Azores were a labyrinth of hidden reefs, shifting currents, and the remnants of centuries-old wrecks. For the crew of Joaquin Mendez' expedition, the moment of truth had arrived, the first direct descent to the Cinco Chagas. Helena Cavalhu reviewed the centuries-old map once more, tracing lines with gloved fingers. Every annotation mattered: tidal shifts, hidden shoals, and references to the moon's position. "We must descend at high tide," she instructed. "Any miscalculation and the currents will drag us off the wreck or worse." Submersibles were prepared, their lights piercing the Atlantic gloom. Divers checked equipment repeatedly, nerves taut with anticipation. The rest of the team remained on the surface, monitoring sonar readings and communications, the tension between them as palpable as the ocean's chill. Captain Joaquin gave the final orders. "Remember," he said, voice firm, "we move carefully. One mistake, and this expedition ends here." The first submersible descended, lights slicing through the blue-black water. Visibility dropped rapidly with depth. The ocean floor seemed to stretch endlessly beneath them, a desolate landscape dotted with rocks, coral, and sediment stirred by their passage. Then, at around 80 meters, the first shapes appeared. Timbers, large, thick beams encrusted with coral and barnacles. The unmistakable outline of a ship. A collective hush fell over the divers' radios. After centuries, the Cinco Chagas revealed herself not in glory, but in the eerie stillness of death. Her hull, splintered yet intact in parts, lay partially buried in sand. Cannon, twisted by time and pressure, jutted from the remains. The galleon seemed almost alive, frozen in the moment the storm had claimed her, a silent guardian of the treasure she bore. The divers moved cautiously, documenting the wreck with cameras and sonar mapping. Every step was calculated. A single misjudged motion could stir sediment and obscure their vision, or worse, destabilize parts of the wreck. And then, the first glimmer of treasure. Among the beams, partially buried in sand and coral, lay a chest. Its iron fittings were rusted, but the locks and hinges remained discernible. The divers approached slowly, hearts pounding. One tentative tap on the chest's lid caused a cascade of pearls to shift within, catching the light of the submersible's lamps. "My God," one diver breathed, "it's real. It's all here." Excitement was tempered by caution. The wreck had been undisturbed for over 4 centuries, and its structure was fragile. Moving too quickly could collapse parts of the galleon or lose the treasure to the shifting sands. Further exploration revealed more chests, each partially buried, each glittering faintly through layers of coral and mud. Diamonds, rubies, and pearls caught the divers' lights, producing the faintest glimmer that seemed almost supernatural in the dim depths. Yet the descent was not without peril. Sudden currents whipped through the wreck site, threatening to push submersibles into jagged beams. Sediment stirred easily, reducing visibility to near zero. One diver narrowly avoided a twisted mast, caught just in time by a tethering line. The Atlantic demanded respect, reminding all that treasure, no matter how alluring, came with danger. As the divers moved between the chests, they began noticing signs of the galleon's last moments. Splintered beams suggested where waves had ripped through the hull. Rusted cannon and broken barrels lay strewn about, scattered by the storm and centuries of decay. It was a silent underwater testament to the chaos of the 1594 storm that had claimed the Cinco Chagas. Helena recorded everything, noting chest positions, the orientation of timbers, and probable locations of additional treasure. Every glimmer of jewels added urgency and tension. The closer they got to the heart of the wreck, the more uneasy the divers became. Some reported shadows moving at the edge of their lights, a trick of the currents, or perhaps something else. Others whispered of a faint, almost musical clinking, like coins shifting in the dark. Hours passed in careful exploration. The submersible's limited air supply forced the team to ascend slowly, carrying only a fraction of the treasure for preliminary examination. Even partial recovery required precision, patience, and nerves of steel. As the submersibles emerged to the surface, the first glimpse of the sunlit Atlantic felt surreal. Divers gasped, exhilarated and exhausted. They had touched history. They had seen the Cinco Chagas and her treasure with their own eyes. But even on the surface, the sense of foreboding remained. The sea around the wreck churned subtly, currents swirling as if restless. The divers, while triumphant, could not shake the feeling that the galleon's curse, the whispers of past tragedies, the greed that had driven men to ruin, still lingered. For the first time in over 4 centuries, the Cinco Chagas had been reached. Her treasure had been glimpsed, partially recovered, and documented. Yet the expedition knew this was only the beginning. The Atlantic had not yet released her fully. Many chests remained buried, hidden beneath layers of sediment and coral. Every dive risked disaster, and every recovered gem brought the team closer to the obsessions, rivalries, and perhaps the fates that had consumed all those who had sought the galleon before. The legend of the Cinco Chagas had entered a new chapter. For the divers, historians, and treasure hunters aboard Joaquim Mendes' expedition, the descent had been a triumph. But the sea, silent and cold, reminded them that nothing in its depths came without cost. And beneath the water, the remaining chests lay undisturbed, waiting patiently, silently, for the next hand daring or foolish enough to claim them. Part 9. The treasure revealed. The days following the first descent were a blur of activity. Submersibles were repaired and prepped, divers rested and reconditioned, and Helena Carvalho carefully studied her notes and photographs. The Cinco Chagas had been located, and partial treasure had been documented, but centuries of sediment, coral, and silt still concealed most of the galleon's riches. By mid-morning on the third expedition day, the team was ready for a deeper, more ambitious dive. Joaquim Mendez gathered the crew, his expression a mixture of determination and tension. "This is it," he said. "We recover as much as we safely can." One wrong move and centuries of legend become a tragedy repeated. The submersibles descended slowly, lights cutting through the dark water. Currents tugged unpredictably, and visibility was poor. The divers moved with caution, scanning the wreck and carefully brushing sediment away from the beams and chests. Then came the first unmistakable sight: a row of chests, partially buried, arranged as though the crew of the Cinco Chagas had attempted to secure them during the storm. The sight was almost surreal. Iron-bound chests encrusted with coral and barnacles, their age made tangible by rusted fittings and splintered lids. "Everyone steady," Helena called over the radio. "Document everything. Don't touch anything yet." The divers mapped the chests, noting their positions and contents glimpsed through cracks in the wood. Pearls shimmered faintly, rubies glinted with deep red fire, and diamonds reflected the submersible's lights in dazzling patterns. It was more than any treasure hunter could have imagined. All 22 chests, intact after over 4 centuries, lying silently in the sand. Recovery began carefully. Divers used lift bags and tethered ropes, moving each chest slowly, ensuring that the fragile wreck was not further damaged. The first chest reached the surface was opened on deck. Its contents were pristine: diamonds, rubies, and pearls, more abundant than even the most optimistic estimates. The value was staggering, well over $1 billion in modern terms. For a moment, triumph overcame caution. The team celebrated. Photographs were taken, and divers relayed the astonishing news to the surface. But the galleon's curse, long whispered in legend, seemed to stir as well. It started small. Divers reported strange noises in their equipment, metallic clinks that echoed through the submersibles, despite all chests being accounted for. At night, crew members awoke with nightmares, describing the cries of drowned sailors, visions of the galleon rocking violently, or shadows moving in their cabins. Some fell ill with sudden fevers or debilitating nausea, as if the centuries-old ocean had marked them for disturbing the treasure. Tensions escalated. The incredible value of the treasure sparked greed and paranoia. Joaquim struggled to maintain order as arguments broke out over the division of chests and ownership rights. Some divers, obsessed with securing individual chests, tried to manipulate logs or claim certain pieces for themselves. Even Helena and Joaquin, united by scholarship and ambition, felt the strain of watching men they trusted descend into suspicion. On the 5th day, disaster nearly struck. A sudden, violent current swept through the wreck site, rocking the submersibles and dragging one chest partially back into the sand. Divers scrambled to secure it, narrowly avoiding disaster as sediment filled the water, obscuring visibility entirely. The incident was a stark reminder that the Atlantic still ruled here, centuries after the Cinco Chagas had sunk. Despite these warnings, the treasure's allure proved irresistible. By the end of the week, all 22 chests were on deck, catalogued and secured. The wealth was breathtaking. Thousands of diamonds ranging from pinhead to fist-sized, rubies deep and crimson, and pearls smooth, lustrous, and abundant. The combined value confirmed centuries of speculation. The Cinco Chagas had carried a fortune beyond comprehension. Yet the victory was bittersweet. Several members of the team reported ongoing nightmares, dizziness, and hallucinations. Some refused to sleep near the recovered treasure, insisting it carried the weight of the lives lost aboard the galleon. Others became obsessive, guarding the chests, counting gems repeatedly, and squabbling over perceived shares. Even Joachim, normally resolute, began to notice the strange phenomena: shadows moving across the deck, faint whispers with no source, and a sense that the treasure itself was alive, demanding vigilance, respect, and perhaps fear. By the expedition's end, the Cinco Chagas had finally revealed her secret. The 22 chests were real, intact, and more valuable than any living soul could imagine. Yet with their recovery, the ancient curse, the whispers of drowned sailors, the misfortune that had claimed countless would-be treasure hunters, manifested once more. The galleon's legacy was clear. The treasure was not simply a reward for the brave. It was a test of humanity itself. Greed, ambition, obsession, and fear intertwined, and those who touched the wealth of the Cinco Chagas found that centuries-old warnings were more than superstition. The ocean had surrendered its secret, but at a cost far greater than any man had anticipated. The story of the Cinco Chagas, now fully entwined with human folly as well as maritime legend, had reached a climax, but its shadow would linger, reminding all that some treasures, however real, are never without peril. Part 10. Legacy and Curse. Azores, casting pale light across the calm Atlantic, as if the ocean itself were sighing after centuries of suspense. On the deck of Joaquin Mendez' expedition vessel, the 22 chests of the Cinco Chagas lay secured, their contents more magnificent than anyone could have imagined. Diamonds sparkled like captured starlight, rubies blazed with the fire of the sun, and pearls gleamed with the soft sheen of moonlight. Humanity had finally touched a fortune that had slept undisturbed for over 4 centuries. And yet, the victory was overshadowed by unease. Crew members whispered of shadows moving across the deck, faint echoes of the ship's long-dead sailors, and a persistent sense that the galleon itself was watching. Several divers had fallen ill, some with sudden fevers, others with inexplicable hallucinations. Even Joachim, normally steadfast, admitted that he felt a weight pressing upon him, not from responsibility or logistics, but something older, darker, and invisible. Helena Carvalho reflected on the irony. Centuries of superstition had warned of curses, of the wrath of the Atlantic, and the restless spirits of the lost crew. Now, with the treasure recovered, the warnings seemed no longer symbolic. They were real. The expedition decided to return to Lisbon cautiously. Every chest was secured, carefully catalogued, and monitored. Yet as they sailed away from the wreck site, subtle signs persisted. Strange noises emanated from the chests during the night, soft clinking like coins tumbling, or the faint groan of shifting timber. Crew members swore they saw flickering shadows in the cabins, unaccountable and fleeting. Some refused to sleep near the cargo, while others grew obsessive, counting and recounting the gems, measuring their brilliance as if confirming the reality of their fortune. Back on land, the human consequences became apparent. Rival treasure hunters who had not participated in the expedition grew suspicious, questioning ownership and legal rights. Greed, ambition, and envy surged with the same intensity as the Atlantic currents that had claimed the Cinco Chagas. Some historians argued that the greatest treasure was not wealth, but knowledge, the recovery of a ship preserved in time, offering insight into 16th century Portuguese navigation, shipbuilding, and maritime commerce. Yet even as scholars celebrated, the shadow of the curse lingered. Several key members of the expedition began suffering accidents or illness. Minor mishaps became serious, disputes erupted, and an air of fear and superstition settled over those who had handled the treasure. Despite these challenges, Joaquin and Helena managed to secure the chests in a guarded location, hoping to study and preserve them while mitigating the psychological strain on the team. They understood that the Cinco Chagas' true legacy was far more than material wealth. The story was one of ambition, obsession, human folly, and the inexorable power of the sea. The treasure, immense and awe-inspiring, became a symbol rather than a simple prize. It represented the human cost of desire, the lives lost in storms, the rivalries, betrayals, and obsessions that had marked every expedition since 1594. Each gem and pearl carried the weight of history, the whispers of those who had perished, and the silent authority of the Atlantic itself. For generations to come, the legend would endure. Writers chronicled the expeditions, historians analyzed the wreck, and adventurers dreamed of wealth lying beneath the waves. But the Cinco Chagas curse, whether real or psychological, would always be a reminder. Some treasures are more than they appear. They test not only courage and ingenuity, but morality, restraint, and respect for the forces that guard them. And beneath the waves near the Azores, the Atlantic continued its eternal watch. Even with the chests recovered, the currents shifted unpredictably, sediment moved silently, and the wreck of the galleon remained, a silent monument to time, fate, and human obsession. Those who had touched her treasure returned to the world changed, haunted by dreams, whispers, and a chilling awareness that the Cinco Chagas had exacted a toll far greater than mere distance, danger, or exhaustion. The story of the Cinco Chagas, spanning over 4 centuries, had reached its climax, yet its legend would never die. The galleon had sunk in 1594, claimed by storms and the Atlantic, but her presence remained, immortalized in the imagination, in greed, and in the eerie, undeniable lesson that some fortunes come with a price no mortal should pay. The treasure had been found, but the curse, real or imagined, would linger forever. The Cinco Chagas remained, in memory and myth, a testament to the enduring power of the sea, the fragility of human ambition, and the eternal allure of riches that lie just beyond reach. And somewhere, deep beneath the waves, the galleon waits still, silent, patient, and watchful, her 22 chests of diamonds, rubies, and pearls forever entwined with the ocean's indomitable will.